The morning my husband handed me a box of my own belongings, I was the one who had packed it. He didn't know that yet. He stood in the doorway of our home office, the one I'd converted from a spare bedroom 8 years ago, back when I was still freelancing and we were still figuring out what our life together would look like. And he held that box like he'd won something. His jaw was set the way it always got when he'd made a decision he knew I wouldn't like but had already decided wasn't negotiable. I recognized that jaw. I'd been married to it for 11 years. "We need to talk," he said. I looked at the box. My diplomas, my external hard drive, the little clay turtle my daughter had made me in 4th grade. All of it stacked neatly inside a banker's box he pulled from the supply closet in our company's main office, which, technically, was also my company. My name was on the original LLC filing. I still had the paperwork. "Okay," I said, "let's talk." His name was Elliot. We met in our late 20s at a trade conference in Atlanta, back when he was doing freelance architectural consulting and I was 3 years into building what would become Meridian Creative Group, a boutique firm specializing in interior design and branded commercial spaces. He had good ideas and a nice smile and a way of making you feel like you were the smartest person in the room. I found out later he did that with everyone, but at the time it felt specific to me. We got married when I was 31. Our daughter, Bay, was born the following year. By the time she was in 3rd grade, Elliot had folded his consulting work into Meridian and taken over the business development side, which freed me up to focus on design. It made sense on paper. It made sense on paper, too, for a while. Meridian grew. We moved from a 2-person operation out of our house to a real office in Midtown Atlanta with 7 full-time employees and a client list that included 2 hotel chains, a regional hospital network, and enough private residential projects to keep us busy year-round. We won a regional design award the year Bea started middle school. I remember standing at that podium thinking that this exact moment was what I'd been working toward since I was 24 years old, sketching layouts on a legal pad in my studio apartment. Elliot wasn't at the ceremony. He said he had a client dinner. I believed him. I believed a lot of things for a long time. The first time I noticed something was off, I told myself I was being paranoid. It was a Tuesday in February, about 14 months before the morning with the box. I had come back from a site visit early, a commercial build-out in Buckhead that had hit a snag with the contractor, and I walked into the office to find Elliot in the small conference room with a woman I didn't recognize. The blinds were half closed. When I opened the door, they both shifted in a way that wasn't dramatic, but wasn't nothing either. Just a half-second recalibration, like 2 people who'd been sitting slightly too close, suddenly remembering where they were. Elliot introduced her as Renata. He said she was a potential new account, a restaurant group looking to rebrand 3 locations. He said they were going over preliminary numbers. She was my age, maybe a year or 2 younger. Dark hair, very put together. The kind of effortless polished that actually takes a lot of effort. She shook my hand and smiled and said she'd heard so much about Meridian. Not about me specifically, about Meridian. I said it was nice to meet her and went to my office and sat there for 10 minutes, staring at a rendering on my screen without seeing it. Then I talked myself out of it, told myself I was projecting. We'd had a rough few months. Nothing dramatic, just the low-level friction that builds up when 2 people are running a business together, and also trying to be married, and also trying to raise a kid who was 12, and therefore in the process of becoming a small, complicated stranger. I figured I was looking for something to explain a feeling that didn't have a clean explanation, so I let it go, and I kept letting it go for the next 14 months. Through a dozen small moments that I cataloged without meaning to, the way you catalog things you don't want to examine too closely. The evenings he came home later than expected. The way his phone started going face down on every surface. The client dinners that started appearing on the shared calendar without the client's name filled in. The fact that the Renata account, the restaurant group, never actually came through, but I'd see her name on emails sometimes when Elliot left his laptop open, and it wasn't in any context that looked like business. I kept working. I kept designing. I picked up Bea from school when it was my week and helped her with a history project she'd been procrastinating on, and took her to get her ears pierced for her 13th birthday, and held her hand while she winced and said it wasn't that bad. I had dinner with my sister in Decatur on Sunday nights when Bea was with Elliot's parents, and I ran 3 mornings a week, and I acted like everything was fine because I was very good at acting like everything was fine. And underneath all of it, very quietly, I started paying attention. The thing about being married to someone who's also your business partner is that you have access to everything. Or you're supposed to. For years, Elliot and I had operated on full transparency. Shared accounts, shared calendar, shared login credentials for all our platforms and financial software. It had been a point of pride for us, actually. We used to tell people that the reason Meridian worked was because we'd never siloed ourselves from each other. So when I started noticing that certain things were siloing themselves, I noticed quickly. It started with the new client pipeline spreadsheet. Elliot had always maintained it. That was his domain, business development, but I had always been able to pull it up whenever I wanted. One afternoon in late spring, I went to access it and found that my editing permissions had been quietly changed to view only. When I asked Elliot about it, he said he was restructuring the whole document and didn't want me accidentally overwriting something in the middle of the rebuild. He seemed slightly irritated that I'd noticed. I said that was fine. I went back to my desk and pulled up the version history. He'd been making changes to that spreadsheet for 6 weeks, mostly small ones, shifting project attribution, adjusting commission structures, reclassifying certain accounts. But a few of the changes were not small. 2 of our largest ongoing accounts that I had landed, that I had designed for, that I had personally managed the client relationship on for years, had been quietly reclassified under Elliot's name in the internal attribution column, the column that, among other things, informed how we divide assets if the company were ever sold or dissolved. I sat very still for a minute. Then I opened a new document and started writing everything down. Over the next 2 months, I did 3 things simultaneously, and I did all of them without telling anyone except my sister and an attorney named Carol, who came recommended by my sister's friend who'd been through a divorce involving a jointly owned business. The first thing I did was document every spreadsheet change, every email I could access, every calendar entry, every financial transaction that looked even slightly irregular. Carol had told me to capture everything in its original form, screenshots with timestamps, PDF exports with metadata intact, printed copies as backup. I got very organized about it. I have always been organized. It was, perhaps, the best professional skill I ever developed. The second thing I did was separate. Not from Elliot, not yet. I separated my own work. Quietly, carefully, I began reaching out to my longest-standing clients directly, not to poach them, not yet, just to check in, to strengthen the personal relationship, to make sure they knew that their work was connected to me specifically and not just to the Meridian name. Most of them already knew this. Clients in the design world tend to follow people, not firms, but I wanted to make sure. The third thing I did was talk to the bank. Elliot and I had a joint business account and a joint personal account. What he apparently didn't realize, or had forgotten, or assumed I'd forgotten, was that I also still had a single-owner business account from the original Meridian LLC filing, before we'd restructured as a partnership. It had been essentially dormant for 8 years, holding just enough to keep it active. I didn't touch it. I didn't move money into it. Not yet. I just confirmed it still existed and that my sole access to it was intact. Carol told me I was doing everything right. She also told me to be patient, and that the hardest part of what I was doing wasn't the documentation. It was maintaining the performance of normalcy while I did it. She was right about that. Bea noticed something before Elliot did. She was 13 and she was perceptive, the way kids who grew up watching adults carefully tend to be perceptive. One evening in July, she came and sat next to me at the kitchen island while I was making dinner, and she was quiet for a minute in the particular way that meant she was about to say something she'd been holding. "Are you and Dad okay?" she asked. I turned down the burner. I looked at her. This person who was half mine, who had my eyes and his stubbornness and her own entirely separate and increasingly complicated inner life. And I thought about lying, the way you instinctively want to protect your child from things that are too big and too adult and too ugly to explain. "We're working through some things," I said. "That's what people say when the answer is no," she said. I laughed a little. "You're too sharp for your own good, you know that?" She didn't smile. "Is it because of that woman? The one who keeps texting him?" I set down the wooden spoon. "What woman?" "I don't know her name. I saw her name come up when he left his phone on the coffee table. He had it face up by accident." "I didn't read the texts," she said very carefully. "I just saw the name." "Okay," I said. "It's okay." "You already knew," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm handling it," I said. She nodded slowly, like she was deciding whether to believe me. Then she got up and set the table without being asked, and we ate dinner and talked about her upcoming school year and the friend group drama she was navigating, and she didn't bring it up again. But as she was going to bed, she stopped in the hallway and looked back at me and said, "I love you, Mom," in the particular tone that meant she wanted me to know she was on my side. That was the night I decided I was done waiting. I made an appointment with Carol the next morning. By the end of that week, I had filed the initial paperwork. Elliot didn't know yet. I had also, through legitimate and carefully documented means, notified 2 of our largest clients that I would be transitioning my work to a new entity, not as a solicitation, but as an FYI, exactly as Carol had advised. Both of them responded within 24 hours. One of them said, and I want to be very precise about this because I have kept the email, "Honestly, we've always thought of this as your work, not Meridian's. We'll follow wherever you land." I read that email 3 times. Then I called my sister. She said, "I've been waiting for this call for 2 years." I said I knew. We both cried a little and then she said, "Okay. Enough of that, what do you need?" That's my sister. Elliot brought me the box on a Wednesday morning. He had found the filing notification the night before. These things have a way of making themselves known, and I could tell from the way he walked into the office that he had spent the night recalibrating, deciding how to position it. He'd settled on decisive, I think. He came in looking decisive. "We need to talk," he said, holding my box. "Okay," I said, "let's talk." He set the box down on my desk. He explained, in the measured tone of someone who has rehearsed, that given the circumstances, he felt it was best for the company if I stepped back from my operational role. He said Meridian needed stability right now. He said he hoped we could be adult about this. I looked at the box, my diplomas, my hard drive, Bia's clay turtle. "Did you pack this yourself?" I asked. "I wanted to be respectful," he said. "That's interesting," I said, "because you forgot that the hard drive is mine personally. It has never been on the company inventory, same with the diplomas." I picked up the clay turtle. "And this isn't company property by any reasonable definition." He blinked. "You packed my personal belongings into a box to present to me as if you're releasing me from my own company," I said, "and you want me to be adult about it." "Claudia, I already spoke to Carol. I'd been working with Carol long enough by this point that I said her name the way you say the name of someone on your team. The paperwork was filed last week. The client transition notices went out on Friday. I have documentation of the account reclassification going back to March, which I'll be sharing with Carol's office this afternoon." The decisive look left his face. "I'm not interested in destroying anything," I told him, and I meant it. "I'm leaving. I'm taking what's mine. the clients I built relationships with, the work that's attributed to me in the original contracts, and my professional reputation, which you haven't managed to touch. I stood up. B's schedule stays exactly as we've discussed with the attorney. I'll be reachable through Carol's office for anything business-related for the next 60 days. You've been planning this, he said. You packed my daughter's handmade turtle into a banker's box, I said. Yes. I planned. I picked up the clay turtle and left the box on the desk. The next 6 months were the hardest I had gone through since the early years of building Meridian the first time. I had a name ready. I'd been sitting on it for a while. Thornfield Studio. I'd always liked the word Thornfield. It sounded like something that had stood up to weather. I filed the LLC, signed a short-term lease on a small office space in Decatur near my sister, and bought a used drafting table and 2 good monitors and a coffee maker that actually worked properly, which the Meridian office one had never done. I had 3 clients from day one, which was enough to cover overhead and not much else. I worked 12-hour days and ate a lot of takeout and picked Bay up from school on my weeks and let her do homework at the drafting table while I worked, which she tolerated more graciously than most teenagers would. She had a way of being present without demanding anything, sitting there with her headphones on, occasionally looking up and catching my eye and giving me a small nod like she was checking in. I didn't crumble. I want to say that plainly, not because I need credit for it, but because I think it matters. There were moments when I wanted to, when the loneliness of it hit me sideways, the particular loneliness of rebuilding something you already built once, knowing exactly how long it takes, knowing every step of the process, and having to do it again anyway. But I didn't crumble. I kept working. By the end of the first year, I had 7 clients. By the end of the second, I had 13 and a waiting list. The call from Renata came 16 months after I left Meridian. I almost didn't take it. I saw the name on my phone and held it for 2 rings thinking about what I owed her, which was nothing, and what I owed myself, which was the option to hang up. I answered. She didn't apologize. I wouldn't have wanted her to, honestly. What she said was, I want to hire Thornfield. I said, why would I want to work with you? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, because I have 3 restaurant locations and a hotel project and a real budget, and because I made choices I'm not proud of, and because your work is the best I've seen in this market and I'd like to pay you what that's worth. I was quiet for a moment too. I'll send you our rates, I said. If they work for you, we can talk. They worked for her. We talked. I'm not going to tell you we became friends, because that would be tidier than what actually happened, which was a professional relationship that was occasionally uncomfortable and mostly excellent. She became one of Thornfield's most reliable accounts. I would not have predicted that. I've stopped expecting to predict most things. The Meridian piece sorted itself out the way those things tend to, not dramatically but conclusively. Elliot ran the company alone for almost 2 years. By most measures, he kept it functional, but the design work suffered without the design director, and he burned through 2 replacement hires in 8 months. Somewhere, in the second year, he brought in an outside business partner to shore up the creative side, a decision that probably made short-term sense, and definitely made long-term sense for me, because when that partner eventually wanted to buy out Elliot's stake, the resulting valuation process required a full accounting of original IP and account attribution. Carol was very good at that accounting process. I won't get into the details of what that settlement looked like, because most of it is confidential, and because, honestly, the number matters less to me now than what it represented. What it represented was, it was always mine. The work was always mine. The documentation proved it, the clients confirmed it, and in the end, even Elliot's own attorney couldn't argue otherwise. I used a portion of it to expand Thornfield's office, hired 2 designers, bought a coffee maker for the new space that was frankly exceptional. Bea was 15 by then, and she had developed opinions about everything, which I enjoyed even when those opinions were directed at me. She had also developed, somewhere along the way, A habit of telling me things directly rather than waiting to see if I'd figure them out on my own. I think she decided during those couple of years that the women in her family were people who dealt with things head-on. I don't know if I taught her that or if she just saw it and decided to adopt it. Either way, I was proud. The morning I signed the papers expanding Thornfield's lease. New office, second floor, actual natural light. I called her on the way out of the attorney's office. It was a Thursday, so she was at school, and she texted back 3 minutes later, "Can't talk in class." What happened? I texted, "Good things. I'll tell you tonight." She sent back a single raised fist emoji, and then, 30 seconds later, "Are you getting a real coffee maker?" Finally, I was already in the car laughing. I texted back, "Already done." There's a thing people say about starting over, that it's the hardest part. In my experience, that's not quite right. The hardest part isn't starting over. The hardest part is the stretch in the middle. After you've been brave enough to leave and before you can tell yet whether any of it is going to work. That gap. Living in that gap while you're still not sure. That's the part that separates the people who make it from the people who don't. I made it. Not because I was fearless. I was genuinely afraid, many times, for many months. But because I stayed organized and I stayed honest with myself, and I had a sister who answered the phone, and a daughter who set the table without being asked, and an attorney named Carol who was, as it turned out, exactly as good as advertised. The clay turtle sits on my desk at Thornfield. The one Bea made in 4th grade. Elliot packed it into that box, and I took it back, and it's been on every desk I've had since. It is not an especially beautiful turtle. The glaze is uneven, and one of its legs is slightly shorter than the others. But Bea made it with her hands when she was 9 years old and pressed her thumb into the clay to make the shell pattern. And there is nothing in my office that cost more than that turtle did. There's a sign above the door of Thornfield Studio that I had made when I signed the lease. Simple, clean, good font. It says what it says and nothing else. I stand under it some mornings when I'm the first one in with my coffee, before anyone else arrives, and I think about the woman who packed her own diplomas into a box in the building she'd built, knowing exactly what she was doing and why. She did not let anyone tell her that was her ending. It was, in fact, where she began. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any mystical sense. I'm not someone who believes the universe arranges things as a reward for good behavior. But I do believe, deeply and from experience, that the choices you make accumulate. They stack up, quietly, over months and years, and eventually, they become the architecture of what your life actually looks like. Elliot's choices stacked up. Mine did too. And in the end, the structures those choices built looked very different from each other. What Elliot built, over those years of slow and deliberate erosion, shifting my name off accounts, reclassifying my work, letting me believe I was still an equal partner while quietly redesigning the foundation beneath me, was something that looked solid from the outside and was hollow at its core. He assumed that because I hadn't said anything, I hadn't noticed. He mistook my composure for unawareness. That was his most significant miscalculation, and I think it says something important. When someone underestimates your intelligence, they don't stop being wrong just because they're confident about it. I'm not going to pretend the months after I left Meridian were easy, because they weren't. There were nights when I sat in my new office, which was, for the first several weeks, a spare desk in a shared workspace near my sister's apartment. And the silence felt very large. I had built something real, something I was genuinely proud of, and I had walked away from it carrying a clay turtle and a hard drive and the quiet knowledge that I had done the right thing. That knowledge is real and it matters, and it is also, by itself, not enough to pay rent. What got me through was not toughness in the dramatic sense. It wasn't a moment of resolve or a speech I gave myself in the mirror. It was smaller than that. It was the habit of showing up, of opening my laptop at 7 in the morning and doing the next thing, and then the next one after that, of calling clients not because I was certain they'd follow me, but because I had built those relationships honestly and they deserved to hear from me directly. Of trusting that the work I'd actually done would speak for itself, because I had documentation proving it had always been mine. That's the part I want to be honest about. Intelligence without integrity is just a tool for manipulation, and I saw that play out in real time with Elliot. He was smart, he knew the business, but he used that intelligence in service of something dishonest, and that choice, made over and over in small increments, is what ultimately undid him. Not dramatically, not overnight, just conclusively. What I try to hold on to, and what I hope Bia has absorbed from watching all of this, is that your integrity is the one asset that nobody can reclassify under their own name. You can lose money, clients, partnerships, office space. I lost all of those things at once. But what you've done honestly, built carefully, earned through actual work, that doesn't transfer. It stays with you. And if you've documented it, it's provable. The clay turtle is still on my desk. It's not beautiful. One leg is shorter than the others and the glaze ran a little on the left side, but Bea made it when she was 9, and it sat on every desk I've ever had, and Elliot put it in a box thinking it was just a thing to be returned, not understanding that it was in fact a piece of evidence about what actually mattered and who actually built what. I start every morning looking at it. It reminds me that the things made with real care tend to outlast the things made with ambition alone, every time without exception.